We got to break Sariba up. Sariba is a cartel. We have to own our grid because we paid for it. You had it too long. That's number one. We need to control the purchasing of fuel because we pay for it. We should be in charge of buying it. The fuel companies, you better buckle up too. Jackson Point pipeline have to be reverted back to the ownership of the country. Oh, Mario, you can't tell them how to operate their business. Well, yes, we can. Having this idea that you're going to impose what's best because of what the law tells you can do will cause an uprising in this country that you've never seen before. My children are going to be saddled with the debt of a billionaire so that he can have his name printed on everything we got around here. Because, let me tell you something, this is Dart Island. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Word of Mouth. Today is Wednesday, March the 8th, 2023. We already almost in the middle of the month, of the third month of the year. And it coming like we just get through celebrating New Year's Eve and Christmas, right? So, but anyway, just didn't get an opportunity to do a show on Friday or Monday. Had some other things that we had to get done. And we still doing some reshuffling of all of the things we're getting ready to relaunch here on Word of Mouth. We're about to take a whole new direction. I've been talking about it for a while, but now we're actually in the process of getting quite a bit of things accomplished. So hopefully in the very near future, we're going to have, Friday evenings, the late night roundtable talk show discussion with various members from different areas within society to come on and talk about the various topics in which are pressing here in Cayman, that we can get different point of views, different solutions, kind of brainstorm and talk about the pressing issues and try to have some sort of solutions that we can try to get implemented. Certainly here in Cayman, we've seen where political ambitions have always been prioritized based on the almighty campaign dollar, and it's no different anywhere around the world. When we look at the reality of some of the things that we see are being implemented, it is simply because that's just how politics work globally, right? We know that a lot of the influence to politicians comes from the political mileage that they can get from whatever policies or projects or things that they can implement. We also know that heavy campaign providers and donators and people who contribute to these politicians, we get to see where their decisions are lean more in the direction of what those persons want. And it's never some publication. It's just a underlying rule of politics, really. And that's the kind of mindset that we need to try to get out of, because when we have fundamental issues that are consistently affecting the wider population of these islands, and there's no real action that is being taken or anything of meaningful substance, because we've seen them kick the can down the road in many instances. And again, we try to comprehend and digest all of the reasonings behind the decisions that they make to prioritize certain things. But one of the most important things is that's why it's important for us to keep the conversations open and public and ensure that we talk about those issues and we bring them to the forefront. We create the awareness, we create the education, we get people involved, we spearhead the march towards openness and transparency so that we can have a very well-rounded opinion based on whatever decision the government is going to make. Because make no mistake, we are the consequence of any decision that any government make, because they're the policy makers. They're the policy changers and shapers. So whatever they do, subsequently, we live in the consequences because We are a part of that environment unless we decide to leave this jurisdiction. But then, sometimes it's better to stick with the evil that you know, because you end up in another jurisdiction, and things may be better in some areas and far worse in others, and it doesn't really fit, and it's not tailor made for anyone. Now, I can say personally that living in Cayman and watching the transformation of politics over the years, there is a very slight shift in the right direction, in my opinion. But when I say slight shift, I mean a very slight shift, almost like a tremor and not an earthquake. But when we look at how certain things in Cayman has evolved over the past 2 to 3 decades, we have to still stop and ask ourselves the question: where within that whole grand master plan of things that they tried to sell us during political campaigns, where is the inclusiveness of the Cayman brand? And we have used the Cayman kind terminology so often that we have now stupidly bought into the idea that there is this thing called Cayman kind. It don't exist. The Cayman kind brand is ridiculous because we've been kind for too long. We see so many things that has transformed and morphed into these things in which we can't control. And whenever we try to step in to have a word and say, oh, well, maybe this has gone a little bit too far to the left or right, then all of a sudden we're being anti. The reality is that we see a lot of things happening. And the reason why they're happening is because we don't have proper strategic policies in place to mitigate any of the unforeseen issues that may come up once a person get comfortable in a certain institution or environments. And we've done a poor job from vetting people at the airport when we let them come in here. And don't get me wrong, Cayman is a tourist-based economy along with financial service industry, two pillars of our economy: tourism and financial service. We have refused to do anything over the years at all, period, to diversify in order to generate revenue in areas that don't cause social deterioration, such as driver's licensing fees, work permit fees, and all of the things that generate revenue that is comfortably installed in our GDP makeup every year. So it's going to be hard for any one or two or a complete party system of politics to do anything different, because no one has ever stuck their neck far enough out to change the status quo, to have the discussion on whether or not we should do something different simply because it's for the betterment of growth economically and socially in our islands. But we don't see nobody making that necessary stance against the things that are repeatedly every year, and it's growing steadily every year, cause these social disruptions. Now, and the reason why I say that is because when we go to the ESO website, the Economical and Statistic Office, which is a government-run website that has data where you can see certain growth of things and margins and different monies that are being made from certain products, you will find a very glaring picture if you look hard enough on the fundamental issues that are causing the social deterioration, the sustainability, and all of the things that are fundamentally affecting the Cayman brand, not the Cayman kind. Because if you think getting on Cayman Airways and they putting a little radio announcement on talking about you got free rum punch, and well, that's not Cayman kind. That's not our brand. There's not one single solitary local restaurant in Cayman that sell all Cayman food. Not one. So how in the world are we going to call ourselves Cayman kind when we don't even have a brand? So when we look at all of the things that we constantly rely on every single year in order to generate revenue, and we look at the infrastructural strain that it caused, not only on just the roadways and buildings and whatever, we're talking about the workforce. We're talking about all those things. I saw where the deputy premier, Mr. Chris Saunders, just announced that he's going to fight to make sure that there's fairness in the workplace amongst Caymanians. You think that this is a new problem? There's no discrimination against Caymanians in the workplace. I'm just happy that a politician has finally stood up and said it publicly and actually got a picture in the paper saying and showing who it is that's standing up towards it. Because it's not no new problem. This is an age-old problem. We've been discriminated against in the workplace since the beginning of the workplace. So let's not kid ourselves. How many politicians in the past done that? None. Zero. We've had people like the PPM who quick to respond when they see something negative or something that can negatively impact the sitting government. Oh, they quick to respond to that. But when Alden and them were building schools and they couldn't finish them, they had two consecutive terms as leadership of government with all of the ministries, and yet they still didn't finish the schools. And one would have thought that prioritizing education would have been paramount and above all. But that didn't take precedent. That didn't take the priority vehicle lean. It didn't. It took the political mileage lean. The funny thing is that they took $50 million from the education budget during that same time that they ran this country into ruins to build a one lane bypass. Yeah, from Prospect all the way to the Hearst Road in Newlands. So I can tell you the priority for the essential things in this country were misplaced and in a lot of cases absent. So how do we reshape the mindset? How do we um, change the mentality of the political system? Well, the first thing we got to do is change the mentality of the electoral system, which is the voters. The voters need to become a little bit more aware and a lot smarter on who they go out and cast their vote for. You know, a vote is so important simply because you are a part of a democratic process that is going to allow you to elect someone who is going to create the consequences in which we all are living. So we can't just elect someone because they showed up during Christmas and the holidays with some turkey and ham and asking you how you're doing and giving you a $50 gift card to go to a supermarket and charging you $8 for a gallon of milk and $9 for 12 eggs. You understand? A $50 gift card go very, very, very short. Yeah, you thought I was gonna say very long. No, but you can't get nothing with $50 in the supermarket that's gonna be anything that is substantial or that's gonna sustain you longer than a day or two. Especially if you got three, four mouths in that household, much less one person. So at the end of the day, we need to better educate our electoral system, which means our voters. And you all have heard me say on many, many occasions that the the system in which we have laid out and rolled out for anybody to come to the Cayman Islands and be a part of our society, our system, be a part of the landscape, be a part of the fabric. We've made it tremendously easy. Now, at the end of the day, when we focus on all of these things that needs to be, reformed, we need to bear in mind that there is one thing that the government has a responsibility for, and not just the opposition or the sitting government or the backbenchers or the independents. Every single duly elected person that's sworn in themselves, because that's what they did on the steps of the Legislative Assembly on swearing in day after the election, have sworn to an oath to look out for the best interests of the people of these islands and the system that runs these islands. So at the end of the day, every one of them, regardless of where they sit in that Legislative Assembly, is responsible. And they only got one job, and that job is to create a sustainable environment for all its people, not just a sector of people who they have been convinced of that if it wasn't for them, the whole island would come crumbling down because they have bought so far into that trickle down effect and that trickle down economics that they believe that the man at the bottom will eventually feel the touch of gold when you got so many takers before it reached rock bottom. The problem is that they've been trying to figure out how to build the pyramids for the last 10,000 years and probably for the next 10,000 years. But they always figured that the pyramids were built from the bottom up. But nobody ever imagined that it might have been built the opposite way around. And the reality is that if you fix it for the guy on the bottom first, then you would have essentially fixed it for everybody. Because if the person on the very bottom has a sustainable environment, then everybody above him should be fine. But that's not how the government see it. That's how no government has ever seen it. Oh, well, let's allow this person to come in and build this big development so that they can give local people jobs. Local people, we got 35,000 work permit grants on this island, and you got maybe 20,000 Caymanians. So how in the world is that benefiting the Caymanian brand? It's not. And I don't have nothing against work permit holders, certainly not. They play an essential part of how we operate on a daily basis. Yes, we need work permit holders. Yes, we need imported labor, for lack of a better term. And yes, those people who work in these institutions help keep Cayman afloat, help keep Cayman going, help keep businesses being open, doors open. We understand that, but we need to also understand at what cost. What is it that we're trading off? And how is it that we can get more people from the local brand instituted into some of these corporations and some of these institutions where they can make enough money to spread their own personal generational wealth amongst their families and not be dependent on the government or the welfare office or NAU. We don't have a welfare office. We have it's called NAU, Needs Assessment Unit, right? So how do we transition from the mentality of where we are being outnumbered, outgunned, out-resourced? Because in 1972, there was an article printed in the Nor'Wester magazine in 1972, were written by a gentleman by the name of Rudder Seltzar, which was the hotel management guy back in the day. I may have pronounced the name wrong, but in any event, for people who have been living long enough, and the people who were living and working in those days, which is the older generation, they would know who I'm talking about. This man wrote an article in 1972 that stated, and I have a photographic memory, unfortunately, so I'm burdened with a lot of stuff packed in my brain. And in that article, and I quote, he said that if the Cayman Islands government thinks that another 100-room hotel will be the solution to its economic growth, they make a sad mistake, because until they have a full comprehensive training program in place to train and educate and bring up the awareness to the local people so that they can participate more in the hospitality industry, in the future, you will be struggling with cheap labor. And the Caymanians will be struggling to get jobs in those areas. And I can tell you, the man must have been Nostradamus' brother, because he nailed it to the T. And that wasn't the only thing written in that article. That wasn't the only thing. He wrote about a lot of other issues that the government was facing at the time. 1972, that was before I was born. That was before my mother had any children. She was still a teenager. Can you imagine? That was written 50 years ago. 50 years ago. And no one, not one single solitary politician that has been elected between then and now has ever taken that into consideration. But yet, here we are in this palace of supposed success with the ruins of the middle class, the average person, and everybody suffering from the high cost of living, suffering in the job force. And then we ask ourselves, how did we get here? We got here very simply because we ignored the writings on the wall. We ignored the warnings that were given. And that's just one area that I'm talking about. And then when we look at the financial service industry, which has been a huge contributor to our global economy and our GDP. They employ 60% of our middle class. They they carry a lot of weight. And guess what? During the COVID-19 pandemic, 2020 to today's date, the financial service industry didn't even skip a beat. You know why? Because most of the people who pumps out all the work that creates those year end bonuses for the senior and equity partners, they could have worked from home. They could have worked right from their homes, and they did that, and a lot of them did that. So the financial service industry, because it was a lot of because 99.9% of its workforce and its workload is overseas. I mean, when I say that, it's all overseas companies. that operate here that we manage those companies right here on our shores. They didn't have to go in the office to do that. So they didn't skip a beat. So traveling and being around people didn't affect the financial service industry at all. But let me ask you this question. Now that we're on that topic, there are $3 trillion in hedge funds and mutual funds and all sorts of investment vehicles that is managed and go through these islands every single year. $3 trillion, and it could be more now. And about 25% of that goes into the legal firms, the law firms, the accounting firms, and the banks and the trust companies that manages and take care of these businesses, right? 25% of $3 trillion is a tremendous amount of money. Now, I want to know, why is it that no government, not one single solitary government, and nobody in the financial sector that monitors the financial service industry, nobody at SEMA, nobody in Cayman Finance, nobody at all, not one single soul ever, ever mention, why is it that we're not getting a sovereignty from that? Why is it that we're not getting an extraction of that 25% that is already being charged to the consumers, to the customers? So it don't affect the customers. The customers will never even know that the Cayman Islands government gets 5% of the revenue that is being extracted for service fees into a sovereignty that can take care of the social welfare, the healthcare, education, and all of the issues that we're facing. Because in any developed country, you're going to always have people who just can't do for themselves. And fortunate enough for us that it's not a lot of us. It's not a lot of Caymanians that need help. It's not a lot. We think that a lot means 5,000 people. If you were to go to any other developed country in this world and tell them that, boy, the only people in our country the only number of people that struggle in our country is 5,000, they would laugh at you. They would say, oh, well, you're the fifth largest financial center in the world. You got one of the top tourist destinations in the world. Yeah, you guys mightn't have any export or import, export of factories, whatever. That's fine. It's because we don't properly manage the things that we do have. We mismanage them. So therefore, we suffer and we keep pulling at straws and kicking the can down the road, assuming that things are going to fix itself. So all we need is 5% of that 25%, and you're talking about $1 billion a year. And my math could be off a bit because I don't have. I'm shooting from the hip here, but I'm just pointing out a very valuable piece of information. Why is it that the premier, the now sitting premier, I'm not even going to rag on Alden on this one because Alden wasn't working in the financial service industry before he became a knight in shining armor, for lack of a better term. But Wayne Pannon is the sitting premier for the last 2 years, who worked at one of the largest law firms in this country called Walkers. He worked there. He worked in the financial service industry. So why is it that instead of championing a conservation bill, he didn't champion a sovereignty to be extracted from the already fees that are being taken out for servicing all of these trillions of dollars to put into a sovereignty that can take care of the very same social welfare system that he's trying to create? Because Wayne Pannon think that creating all these social programs is the solution to our problems. Oh, let's put a percent, let's pay a piece of your light bill, let's get some stipends. To who? The problem is that they think, well, no, and let me rephrase that. They've already made up their mind that they are the smartest people on this island. So therefore, anything else anybody else got to say is beneath them. So under no circumstances, whether it's pride, ego, or just plain stupidity, they'll never take on board something that they didn't think of or that they didn't implement. They'll never do it because it exposes them, I assume. But they're not looking at the greater good that taking it on board would create, as opposed to their own personal salvation of who they are. And that's the problem that we have in this country. We got too many people who are self-serving that are being duly elected to be a part of politics in our country. And that's a fact. 5% is all we need to come out of that already 25% that is being extracted. And you've just created a whole new revenue stream that can then make us reluctantly look at, oh, well, if you work in this industry and that industry, you're not eligible to have a driver's license. And the problem with our traffic problem is not the roads, it's the amount of drivers that are on the roads and who we allow to drive. I can tell you right now, people that got licenses in this country shouldn't be driving. I know people who hire nannies, get them a driver's license, buy them a car, and let them go pick their children up from school. Yeah, that's who we go on the road driving. And half of those people, and nothing against them, no discrimination against them at all. But when you put in the job description, you must have a driver's license. That's automatically assuming that that person will be on the road and have a car, whether it's provided by themselves or by their employer. You've just put another driver on the road that don't need to be on the road at an hour, which is the most tedious time. But nobody's looking into these things because they don't want to offend the people who got licenses. You know, our system is flawed in so many ways. And I keep saying it. We got the best banana republic running in the world because we boast in all of these first world, you know, attributes like, oh, we are first world country, but all we got is third world policies. Third world policies we got in place running this first world country, which makes us a banana republic. Plain and simple. Then we have the discussion about cost of living. We'd have this discussion about all these different things. But who's taking them on? Who really taking them on? And then whenever one of the ministers or one of the other politicians decide to champion something that is meaningful, then the rest of the cabinet don't support them. I mean, come on, man. Like today, you look at the headlines. McKeever been now formally charged and going to court for these assaults. Why is that even? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that he shouldn't go to court. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be, held to the law. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, why in the world are we having to read that, knowing already about this? I want to see politicians doing something that is meaningful, that is gonna impact the current situation that we're struggling with. But nobody don't seem to take this stuff on. Nobody not championing the causes that are affecting the average person. You know, the lady that and the family I was helping, over the past couple of months with the kids that they were sleeping on the beach and whatnot. And again, like I said, I don't call names, and I don't point fingers, and I don't make an indication as to who these people are, you know. But the bottom line is that these people still, and right now I'm in the process of trying to help one of the members get a job so that they can try to get themselves back on their feet. But the reality is that there are many things that can be done overnight. Now there's no magic wand and there's no silver bullet. But what I do know is that there are a lot of things that can be implemented that can drastically change what's happening right now. But no politician don't do it because there is no political mileage that comes from it. Oh, and then when election comes around, there'll be no campaign dollars because they would have offended the establishment that benefits the most from leaving things the way they are. So if you ever want to find the problem, ladies and gentlemen, now this is going to be a big bold statement. If you ever want to find the problem, right? Think about this for a second. This is food for thought. If we believe that the system is broken now, right? Go and look at all the institutions that are benefiting from the system being the way it is. You listening? All of the institutions that are benefiting from the way the system is currently. And if we agree that the system is broken and it's not inclusive of all and it's not sustainable, once you come to the term and the agreement that the system is broken, look at all the people who benefiting from the system the way it is, and there is your problem. That, my friend, is your problem. You know why? Because those who are benefiting from the system being the way it is are those who pay for the campaign dollars to continue for it to stay the way it is. Facts. Now, nobody don't want to hear that. Nobody don't want to talk about that. And you have these technocrats who got these degrees on the wall behind the desk in their office saying that they qualified to do all of these things, but we too dumb to comprehend what they're doing. Hence the reason why whenever we speak out about these things and whenever we speak loudly about these things, and especially me publicly, then they, oh, well, Mario don't know nothing. Oh, Mario this and he da 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 da. That's fine. That's fine. One thing I know for sure is that in order to chop a tree down with an axe, you need somebody to swing it. That's a fact. So if they believe that a small axe can't cut down a big tree, they make a sad mistake. And I think that's where a lot of them became complacent and never ever seen the paradigm shift coming until it already hit the doorsteps. It already taken place. Now they're going to start feeling the effects of it because they had no clue that it will come in. No clue at all. And revolution, when the revolution hit Cayman, it's not going to be the age old methodology. It's going to be technological revolution. It's going to be advancement. It's going to be very smart. They don't understand that. So if they believe that people are going to continue to be oppressed and suppressed and marginalized and gated out and and continue to make this environment unsustainable and unbearable, they make a sad mistake. There are a few fundamental changes that could be made tomorrow morning that could change the trajectory of where we're going now from a sustainability. But again, like I said, if it doesn't have the political mileage or if it doesn't have the status quo approval, you never get anywhere. You never get anywhere. So sometimes you have to take matters into our own hands. And that's what we got to do. It's called Section 72 of the Constitution. Gives us the power of referendum. And what we need to write in that Constitution now, there's an amendment to that law that needs to be changed. Because in the law states that if it's a matter of national importance, you can trigger a referendum. We need to change that. If it's a matter of the best interest of the people, we have the right to trigger. Because who determines if it's a matter of national importance? But the very same people that we want to bring to their attention that this issue is a problem for us. So what happens if they don't deem it a matter of national importance? Does it mitigate our efforts? Does it defeat us? We need to put clearer English in that constitution when it comes to that section, along with a lot of other amendments that I've already seen in the constitution. I read the document 100 times. There are some good things in there. And that section 72 prior to 2009 wasn't in there. So we want to give thanks for that. They never thought we would ever exercise it. And worst off, they never thought we'd be successful when exercising it. And we was. So at the end of the day, we need to focus on the things that are fundamentally affecting the Cayman Islands and its people and the sustainability. And how do we do that? Is by creating awareness, having the conversation, having the hard conversation, making sure that we talk about these things. Let's leave the negativity on the roadside. Let's not even pick it up and bring it into our space. Let's make sure that we talk about the things that are going to alleviate some of the pressures that we feel on a day-to-day basis. Let us not follow down this foxhole of deception where we're going to get lost in translation simply because they think that we are too dumb to understand what's going on. What they didn't give an account for was the evolution of education. They never thought in all of their life, especially the older politicians, that there will come a day that you'll have a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old sitting in the halls of parliament in the UK asking a very important question. The problem is that we tend to don't see further than the tip of our nose. And most people cut off their nose to spite their face, not realizing that it's your very own that you are undermining. The problem is, and I see it all the time, if we were to go out to march or protest against something that is meaningful, the first thing we'd be labeled as is troublemakers, attention seekers, people who just don't, you can't satisfy. But the real issues is that how do we avoid political whiplash from some of the decisions that politicians make? And I'll tell you how you avoid that by bringing yourself up to speed, educating yourself, being aware of your surroundings, making sure that every decision they make that becomes the consequences of your environment, you pay attention to. You make sure that you do the necessary research and the necessary questions, and you make sure that you understand fully what it is they're talking about. Because if not, we're going to constantly see reports like this. This report right here was done in 1979. This report was done in 1979 by United Nations. And it's a report about the consumption of energy in the Cayman Islands in 1979. I was still a baby. But yet, not one single politician on this island, and even then and even today, that is aware of this report has done anything to fix the problem. But yet, here we are talking about it, or here I am talking about it. I've talked about this until I was weak in the face. You know, in 2016, there was a documentary. There was a documentary done called Trillion Pound Paradise, right? Trillion Pound Paradise. And in that documentary, there was a series of interviews from different people in our society. Luckily for me, I was one of those people, right? And I was one of the last people on that documentary on how they had it lined up that had an opportunity to speak, right? And I watched it the other day again to refresh myself. And I heard statements that were made by business people in Cayman. I saw where Jack Peretti walked around the supermarket with a woman from England who lived here and talked about how expensive it was. This is 2016. This is post hurricane. This is post um, COVID-19. I call her Hurricane COVID because that was a category 10. So at the end of the day, right, I'm looking at all of these various interviews with various people. The one that stuck out to me the most, besides my own, was the one of the lady in West Bay. I can't remember her name, and even if I did, I wouldn't mention her name. But she was a civil servant that had retired. She worked for civil service for 40 years, and she was living in her house, West Bay, with her daughter and her grandchildren. And her house had mold in it due to damage from Hurricane Ivan. Now, 2016 and Hurricane Ivan were 2004, and this woman living in these conditions. Now, he went inside her house and he did a full interview. And the funny thing is that he spun it in a way of how we can have this thriving financial service unit where millionaires are driving around in fancy cars and living in mansions, but yet right down the street in West Bay, here's a woman that worked for civil service for 40 years, probably contributed to some of the economic growth and success of some of these institutions that enjoy it. But yet, here she is on the back streets living in these conditions. That was one thing that stuck out. The other thing that stuck out was when he interviewed Aldin, who's the premier at the time, and he labeled him as the most powerful man in the Cayman Islands. And he asked him about a social welfare. You know what Aldin said to him? Aldin said, "Oh, well, we got charities to do that." He said, "But here in England, we got a social welfare system to help people." Aldin was very comfortable with saying that we had charities to do that. And you all know how I feel about charities. So, and there was another misconception that was repeatedly mentioned throughout that video. And I encourage you all to watch it. Trillion Pound Paradise, Cayman Islands. Go watch the documentary. And there was a lot of misdirection in there. Jake Peretti, he worded it and he made the video and how he wanted it to look. There was a lot of content in which I shared that it didn't air. There was a lot of things that I said that it didn't air. And then there was some important things that I said that they did air, and it's on there. You will see it for yourself. But at the end of the day, I heard them use the word tax-free haven at least 25 times in that entire video or more. And we had one of our local business people when he asked him directly. So the Cayman Islands is a tax-free haven. He said yes. The Caymans now, not the Cayman Islands, the local person here that he interviewed. Yeah, the Caymans is a tax-free haven. He didn't even know the difference between a tax-free jurisdiction and a tax-free haven. Didn't know the difference. And these are the things that we overlook. These are the things that we let fly by night. But when you look at the system and you look at those who are benefiting from the systems that exist, is therein lies the problem. Because those are the same people that wants to keep the system just the way it is. And if we can agree that the system now currently isn't sustainable, then we must also agree that the people who are enjoying it are those who are the problem. So, you know, Ronald Reagan said in 1980, before he took office, on a speech that he made, he said, people come to the government to help them fix their problem. He said, but what they don't realize is that government is the problem. I think that was a mouthful. I think that was the most iconic statement he made through his entire tenure as US president. No, I'm telling you. But how do we fix this mentality? How do we shift away from the current situation that has allowed us to subliminally buy into the propaganda which has been fed to us for the last 3.5, 4 decades? So we need to fix this problem. We got to fix this problem. So we can't continue to be institutionalized to the system which has now run aground. It's on a sandbar. The system, picture the system being a big cruise ship and picture it being run up on a sandbar. It can't go nowhere. People are struggling. People are jumping off. So when we talk about cost of living, when we talk about sustainability, when we talk about social economic impacts, when we talk about environment, when we talk about all these things, traffic and all the infrastructural strain that we've seen over the last 20 years because of the population growth, and we've seen how things have shifted, we have to understand the importance of getting it right or even trying to get it right. The problem is that there's no perfect system. There'll never be a perfect system. But how is it that we can live in a society today where you have a sector of our society where one person in that institution can carry home $7 million, $8 million a year just in bonuses, not salaries? But then we got a lady and her daughter and her two grandchildren sleeping on the beach in the car, bathing in the public bathroom. And that's just one case that I'm mentioning. So if you can't see that something is fundamentally wrong with that picture, then we have a problem. We have a serious problem. And the only one way to fix that is to ensure that we become better aware, we educate ourselves, so that when we go to the polls to vote, we're not voting for somebody who came to us with turkeys and ham. Okay? No more turkey politics. Let's get that out of our system. Let's flush that and get rid of that. Because the generational influence that we've had from our forefathers has come home to roost. It's time to change that narrative. It's time to change that mindset because it's not working. It's clearly not working. So again, how do we fix this? We create awareness, educate. And that's how I feel that we can be most effective on changing the system. Now, that's why I mentioned earlier that we want to have these Friday night talk shows where we can have roundtable discussion that bring in various people from various areas of our society to sit down and have a conversation and talk about solutions, talk about what they're experiencing, how they see things, how things affect them, how they see things affecting others. Because there is a host of different things that we can deal with, but unless we know what the problem is, we can't ever make an attempt to fix it. Now we know what the obvious ones are: cost of living, probably the highest, the biggest one. We know that healthcare, we know that insurance for healthcare, all these things are fundamentally affecting the way and the quality of our life. People don't really understand how important it is for us to get this under control. We can't continue to think that this thing gonna work itself out. Oh, it'll fix itself. Don't worry about it, it'll be fine. It won't be fine. You can't keep painting a wall red expecting it to be blue at some point. You can't. You have to eventually change the color and come to the realization that you're not gonna ever get what you want from continuing to do all the things that you're doing prior to that creates something other than what you want. We all know the definition of stupidity, and we all know the definition of insanity, right? I don't need to repeat it. I don't need to say it. We all know what the definition of insanity is. And that's why I struggle when I see all of these PR attempts from institutions like CUC oh, scholarship deadline has been extended and all these things. They're doing everything in their best effort. When has CUC ever went to these lengths of satisfying the public's wondering minds of what they do and what they contribute? Why all of a sudden? Because they know they holding the smoking gun. They own our grid that should be owned by us. All of their infrastructure that the grid distribute current on is on our land, not theirs. They don't own none of it. The road shoulders and the private properties that light poles are in, it's our land. Why do we let them own it and then charge us to use it, charge us to maintain it, and then they charge other utility companies to use it and pocket the profits? We can't be this naive in 2023. We can't be this stupid. I just need 1 month in off-reg to write policies that can't be changed in 10 years, and I guarantee you we'll be good. Is there some legal ramifications? Yeah, but let's take that on. Let's just accept the fact that we need to do this for the betterment of our country and the sustainability of our people. Let's just take that on now and make that first step towards getting the right thing in place. Because otherwise, it's just going to continue to do the same thing over and over. It's not going to ever get any better. So I don't subscribe to the idea that we should just, okay, they've been doing that for 20 years, Mario, leave it alone. No, I don't subscribe to that. Because every day is a new beginning. Every single day. Just like this 42-year-old report, 1979, where they made in the executive summary some recommendations that can still be made today, that are still important today. They should have been made back then, but they wasn't. So we need somebody with the political willpower, not the cowardness of the past politicians that I've seen. Somebody with courage to implement these things, to get these things done. We'll never see fair distribution of energy in this country if we got one company providing it. We see where Ofreg just approved a 3 megawatt alternative energy injection to the grid. Who do you think will pay for that? All of the petroleum-based products that the utility company use is 100% pass-through cost to the consumer. The utility company have a binding contract that states that they need to provide core energy, which is that top wire, which is that high-powered wire that runs throughout the whole island that provides core energy. No matter how much alternative energy is plugged to the grid, the cost of distributing core energy does not change. And when I say the cost of fuel to run the generators that pumps that core energy don't change. But if you're reducing the people who are responsible for the cost of the fuel, then you are increasing the cost of the people who remain. It's not rocket science. It is very simple. And I'll illustrate it for you very quickly, as I've done before in the past. Let's just say that this phone is the grid. This is everybody in Cayman. And this book is the utility company. Okay? This is the wire harness that goes to the grid from the utility company. Now, if that utility company spends $10 million a day to provide the utilities to that grid, 10 million a day, by paying for fuel, and I'm speaking hypothetically, just so you understand what it is I'm saying. And it's 100% pass-through cost to the consumers of the grid, $10 million a day. Now, just imagine if half of that grid went to solar and came off of the grid, right? That utility company still has an obligation to provide core energy throughout the whole island. And in order to do so, they still have to burn the same amount of diesel on a daily basis to provide that. But when you got 50% of the people off the grid, who's no longer responsible for paying for fuel because now they have a solar system in their house that they do not contribute to burning fuel. In fact, CUC give them a credit. Who do you think gonna pay or pick up the tab for that 50% that has come off the grid, they redistribute the cost of fuel to the remaining 50%, which naturally, by mathematical economics, increases the value and the cost. So your bill goes up. It's that simple. So until we have a better contract in place, until we understand the dynamics of the existing one, and until we take the bull by the horn and take control and make sure. Because the first argument will be, oh, well, the CUC will just pack up and leave. Well, make them pack up and leave. Bye. It's a publicly traded company. We'll take the pension money and buy out Fortis, and they can get and leave and go. Who cares? This is the problem. We have allowed for outside forces to tell us that we don't know how to do anything. Let us do it and we'll show you how to do it. We'll get it up and running and then we'll train you how to run it. I haven't seen the transition of handing it over yet. But that's their biggest argument. That's their best argument. That's their go-to. That's their ace of spade. But the reality is that how do we change that? We change politicians. Oh, but it's going to be a legal battle. Let it be a legal battle. It's one that we need to take. The utility company is only doing what's in the best interest of their shareholders. I'm not wronging them for doing what's in the best interest of their shareholders. What I am saying is they're not going to do it on the back of the poor people of this country any longer. That needs to stop. Government need to be having a conversation about owning that grid. Government need to be having a conversation on who we allow to benefit from the purchasing of fuel. That all has to change. But nobody wants to talk about it. Again, it goes back to my point I made earlier about the people who pay for campaigns, the people who pay the lobbyist dollars, the people who want the status quo to stay the same are the people who are benefiting from the status quo. Because if the system is broken, and we agree, and the people who benefiting from the system that is broken, we must also agree that they're the ones responsible for keeping it the way it is. So let us not be tricked by the reality that they employ Caymanians. Let us not be tricked by the reality that they gives out scholarships. I always say that's the least they could do. And then somebody said to me one day on the streets, oh, but you know, CUC provides a great service. Well, you know what? They should. I don't disagree that they provide a good service. They provide a very stellar service. But they should. You know why? Because we pay top dollar for it. We should at least get what we pay for. And stop tapping them on the shoulder for providing something that we pay top dollar for. When you look on your light bill, it got 4 or 5 items on it. Go and read what they say. Energy surcharge, alternative energy surcharge, maintenance fee, fuel factor. Oh, it's ridiculous. And we happily pay it and tell them thank you too at the end of the day. But these are the things that we need to focus on and have the conversations about. Now, what I would say when it comes to diversifying our portfolio and generating revenue in other ways. Again, we saw where the minister from Northside, J.E. Banks, have made some initiatives in order to build relationships within the region, right? In order to get food products such as produce from right in our region. That way we don't have to be constantly relying on North America for all of the imports of food that we get, because Grace Canada is in Jamaica, but yet all of our Grace Canada products comes from Florida. Why? Why it gotta be shipped to Florida, repackaged, retail, and then shipped to Cayman to go on our supermarket shelves? It should be bought straight from the Grace Canada factory in Jamaica. Why don't the local supermarkets have a relationship with those people? And that's just one item. I mean, that's just one product line. So anyway, I just checked the comments right quick just to make sure that I'm not leaving there, but I'm not gonna have many people on, so that's fine. So when we have these conversations, hopefully starting in the next couple of weeks on the Friday nights. These are the kind of topics we want to be talking about. We look at land ownership. We look at all of the things. I was having a conversation with someone I deem very smart, talking about land and keeping land and selling land and all these different things. And she made a lot of good points, and I was expressing my points. I wasn't trying to convince her otherwise. I was just trying to show a different sort of scenario when it comes to land ownership and those people who have the fortunate situation to inherit land, right? Because not every Caymanian have a family member who got land or inherited land that they could give to their children and pass on and so on and so forth. Not everybody have that luxury. So I was just trying to be a little bit more open-minded on how you go about utilizing it to better yourself and create your own personal wealth so that you can hand on to your children as well. And it don't always necessarily have to be the same exact thing that you inherited. It could be that and more based on how you use your assets in order to better yourself and create your own personal wealth. But at the end of the day, when we look at how big the struggle has become, because even to properties that were considered relatively cheap 20, 25 years ago are now extremely expensive and far, far outreachable than the average person, especially when you have that that generation of kids who are going to come out of school every year. We got hundreds of kids leaving school every year, and not all of them going to have the opportunity to go to college. So these are the people who are going to have to stay behind, get regular jobs, get into the workforce, try to create their own personal wealth so that they can either purchase land, build a house, or buy a house that's already built, whichever, or buy an apartment, or whatever the case is. You know, until we really focus in and hone in what the fundamental issues are within that area, we're going to always find where it's going to be a huge struggle for the Caymanians to attain any property and be homeowners and live the proverbial Caymanian dream. But you know, I was talking to a couple of friends over the past couple of years, and we were all sharing ideas on how we go about foreclosure on properties and whatnot. And one of my things were is that I find it very, very disturbing that banks can take people property and sell it for what's owed as opposed to what the market value is. And that in itself have allowed people who in the bank who have friends to call their friends and say, hey, this house has been foreclosed on. You come down here and get a deal on it. And I can tell you, it happens. It still happens. It happens around the world, and Cayman is no exemption from it. It happens here, right? But the scenario I want to paint is this, and it goes back to the person who inherited land. If a person inherits an acre land from their parents or their grandparents or uncle or brother, whoever, and they got it in their name and it's free and clear because you can transfer land to a family member out of love and compassion for the first time, so that way you don't have to pay no stamp duty. So they can get that property free and clear, no money exchange, right? And they have that property, and that property comes at a value. And let's just speak hypothetically. Let's say that land is $200,000, right? That person then either wants to build a house on it or apartments or whatever they want to do. Let's just use one scenario. Let's say that person got married, had two children or a child or whatever, and they decide now they want to build a family home on it. And this is something that happened in more times than you'd like to believe. So they go to the bank, they use the land as collateral to attain a mortgage, they build their house, and for whatever reason, 5, 6 years down the road, they've been paying their mortgage on time, everything good, and then bam, something happened that's beyond their control, like COVID-19 or some medical issue that they can't afford to pay for, or the insurance didn't cover fully. And then now they're in a problem. And then all of a sudden, one of the two people job becomes redundant. And now there's only one person in the household working, supporting the mortgage, the two children, and all the expenses in the house, right? And then they fall behind. And then, God forbids, the house goes into foreclosure. And let's say they borrowed another $250,000 to build a house on the $200,000 property. So now they got $450,000 invested, right, in this place. And now, after 10 years of paying their mortgage, they fall into trouble, and now their house go into foreclosure. And let's just say in that 10 years they've paid back 150,000 out of that out of that $250,000 mortgage. Okay. Now their loan is down. Their loan is down to $150,000 or $110,000, but the house goes into foreclosure. How is it right for the bank to take that house, right, and sell it only for the value of the remainder of the loan, as opposed to taking the house, selling it for reasonable market value, taking what is owed and giving that family what's left so that they can have something to restart and rebuild their life on. But no, we allow the bank to totally annihilate that family and push them so far down in the gutter that in some cases there's never no recovery from that. Why isn't it that our government, the ones that claim that they so for the people, why is it that Wayne Pannon didn't sit down with his cabinet and say, look, we need to legislate laws to protect people from these sort of circumstances and scenarios? Because it happens all the time. It's still happening today. Right this minute it's happening. Matter of fact, I can tell you why it's happening in this way, because it just happened to my granduncle, a family member. The man 89 years old, 8 to 9 years old. Somehow, by some miracle, and I'm going to investigate this to the end, credit union gave him a loan a couple years ago. Now, I don't know what credit union doing giving a man of that age a loan, a refinance, and to build something on his yard that he had. But in any regard, he foreclosed on it. Credit union repossessed his place and sold it. The person who bought it realized that it was going to be more trouble than he wanted to take on. He resold it. The property just sold for $500,000, and I know that the loan was under 200,000. And the man homeless at 89 years old, homeless at 8 to 9 years old, and the man homeless lost his house and land that he lived on all his life after he left his mother's house, which was right across the street. And now his house is being bounced around in the real estate market by the rich who can afford to buy it, and that man ended up with nothing. So why credit union didn't, and I don't know what they sell it for, what they sold it for. I'm assuming because he didn't get anything. Why is it that when they repossessed it and put it on the market, they didn't sell it for market value so that he could have had something to start back, at least pay rent for the next 3 to 4 years? How in the world we can let an 8 or 9 year old Caymanian who went to sea be homeless at that age in his life? You know why? Because our system is broke and nobody not interested in fixing it. They took the man house and sold it. I don't know what they sold it for, but I do know that he didn't get nothing at all. And I know what he owed were far less than what that property was valued, because it's commercial property. That's a fact. And this is the sort of thing that needs to stop in this country. So I don't know why Wayne Pannon can sit down on his two hands and beat his chest up every time he go out and clean the community or pay somebody to weed whack beside the roads and call himself a statesman or a country creates community creates country. And right under your watch, these kind of things happening. Oh, I guess he not in your constituency, so I guess he not valuable enough to you to help. I heard politicians say that out of their mouth. Oh, well, he not my constituency. I'm not interested. Listen, here's a friendly reminder to all duly elected people in this country. The three Cayman Islands are your jurisdiction. The three Cayman Islands is your constituency. The entire islands, not just one portion of it where we have stupidly gone and breaking up our entire island into 19 electoral districts. Can you imagine how stupid we are? We got 75 square mile island with 19 electoral districts. You can't even make that up. But anyway, today is Wednesday. Thank you all for watching the show. I'm going to end on that note. I'm going to put a couple plugs in for Jet Around Cayman, because Jet Around Cayman coming up on the Easter weekend. It's going to be a full fun pack weekend. We're going to have a launch party on Thursday and a big party on Saturday. We will be putting out all of the promo stuff by the end of the week, early next week. And we hope everybody come out and participate, come and be a part of the events and support our local riders. It's a fully local Caymanian event that has been traditionally annually around the time of Easter, and we just brought it back last year, and then this is the second year now that we are doing it, and we encourage everybody to come out and support it. So Jet Around Cayman is a local race around the island with cash prizes and whatnot, and the events is just an activity that we love to do, especially when it comes to racing boats or jet skis or whatever it is on the water, because we got maritime history. Our entire society was built from our forefathers who went to sea and built this very economy. So again, I just want to encourage everybody to come out. It's during the Easter weekend, so nobody not doing nothing, because our Easter starts Thursday all the way back to Tuesday. So that's how we get down in the Cayman Islands when it comes to Easter. So at the end of the day, come out and support your local riders. We got some international riders coming in. Hopefully, we're able to get everything in place before next month. Things are looking good. We're right on schedule, but we should be fine. So thank you all for watching Word of Mouth. Please don't forget to like and share our page. And we also got a YouTube channel up and running. So for those who don't have Facebook, I don't know how you would hear this if you don't, but you can go to our YouTube channel, Word of Mouth, and you can watch all of the shows that we've posted on there. So thank you again. See you on Friday. Enjoy the rest of your day.
We got to break Sariba up. Sariba is a cartel.
We have to own our grid because we paid for it. You had it too long. That's number one. We need to control the purchasing of fuel because we pay for it. We should be in charge of buying it. The fuel companies, you better buckle up too. Jackson Point Pipeline have to be reverted back to the ownership of the country. Oh, Mario, you can't tell them how to operate their business. Well, yes, we can. Having this idea that you're going to impose what's best because of what the law tells you can do will cause an uprising in this country that you've never seen before. My children are going to be saddled with the debt of a billionaire so that he can have his name printed on everything we got around here. Because let me tell you something, this is Dart Island.